Did you know that during the Dark Ages, when Europe was engulfed in intellectual darkness, a beacon of light shone in the east? Welcome to the Islamic Golden Age. In the midst of history, nestled between the 8th and 14th centuries, a period of intellectual and cultural prosperity unfurled. This was the Islamic Golden Age, a period marked by remarkable advancements in virtually every field imaginable. It was the time when the Abbasid Caliphate, a dynasty known for its patronage of the arts and sciences, held sway over a vast empire. At the heart of this empire, in the bustling city of Baghdad, stood the House of Wisdom. This wasn't just a library, but a global intellectual hub, where scholars from diverse backgrounds gathered. Here, they not only preserved, but also translated and synthesized a vast corpus of knowledge from ancient civilizations, including Greek, Persian, and Indian. The House of Wisdom was a testament to the thirst for knowledge that characterized the Islamic Golden Age. Muslim scholars, with their pens as their swords, breathed new life into the intellectual heritage of antiquity. They translated and built upon the works of Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, and many others. This wasn't merely a process of preservation, but a foundation-laying endeavor for an intellectual and cultural renaissance. These translated works, enriched with the insights of Muslim scholars, later found their way back to Europe. They sparked the European Renaissance, a period of rebirth that marked the end of the Dark Ages and the dawn of modern Western civilization. The Islamic Golden Age was a vibrant era of innovation driven by an unfettered spirit of inquiry. Scholars of this era didn't limit themselves to a single field, but ventured into diverse domains. From astronomy to zoology, from algebra to medicine, from philosophy to art, their contributions were profound and far-reaching. And it wasn't just about the sciences. This period also saw a flourishing of art, literature, and philosophy, with works that continue to inspire and influence even today. This era was marked by remarkable advancements in various fields. Let's explore some of these innovations. The Islamic Golden Age was a fertile ground for scientific breakthroughs. The air was electric with the exchange of ideas, and innovation was the order of the day. One of the brightest minds of this era was Al-Khwarizmi. His contributions to mathematics were groundbreaking. He introduced the world to a new discipline, algebra, a term that originated from his seminal work, Kitab al-Jabr. This book, filled with mathematical solutions and methods, was the cornerstone of algebra as we know it today. But Al-Khwarizmi's genius didn't stop there. He also introduced the concept of algorithms, a fundamental component of modern computing. His works transformed the mathematical landscape and set the stage for future advancements. On the celestial front, Al-Battani's work in astronomy was nothing short of revolutionary. He improved the measurements of the solar year, refined the existing values for the Earth's axial tilt, and corrected Ptolemy's astronomical model. His precise calculations and observations were a testament to his meticulous nature. Al-Battani's contributions to astronomy are still recognized today, and his methods continue to be a reference for modern astronomers. In the realm of physics and metaphysics, Al-Farabi was a beacon of knowledge. His ideas on the nature of the universe, causality, and the existence of voids in space were far ahead of his time. Al-Farabi's work laid the groundwork for a rational approach to understanding the physical world. His teachings influenced generations of scientists and philosophers, shaping the way we perceive reality. These scholars, along with countless others, were the pillars of the scientific revolution during the Islamic Golden Age. They dared to question, to explore, and to innovate. Their thirst for knowledge was insatiable, and their contributions were profound. These scientific milestones laid the foundations for modern scientific inquiry and study. It was a time of discovery, of enlightenment, and of progress, a time that forever changed the course of human history. Indeed, these scientific milestones laid the foundations for modern scientific inquiry and study. The Islamic Golden Age was also a period of groundbreaking advancements in medicine and healthcare. This era was marked by the diligent work of scholars who relentlessly pursued knowledge and made discoveries that revolutionized medical science. One of these scholars was Al-Razi, known to the Western world as Razis. His work on smallpox and measles was pioneering in its time. Al-Razi was the first to differentiate between these two diseases, a distinction that was not recognized in European medicine until centuries later. His treatise on smallpox and measles was translated into various languages and served as the standard text in the field for centuries. Then there was Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, whose monumental work, The Canon of Medicine, became an essential medical text in both the Islamic world and Europe. This 5-volume book was a comprehensive guide to medicine, compiling and expanding on the existing knowledge of the time. It covered everything from anatomy and physiology to diagnosis and treatment. The canon remained a vital reference in medical education until the 17th century. But the progress wasn't limited to theory alone. During the Islamic Golden Age, we see the establishment of the first hospitals, known as Bimaristans. These were institutions that offered free healthcare to anyone in need, regardless of their social status. These hospitals were equipped with pharmacies where medicines prepared by expert pharmacists were provided. They also served as medical schools for educating the next generation of physicians, with practical training forming a crucial part of the curriculum. These medical schools were not only places for learning, but also for the development of medical ethics. They emphasized the importance of patient care and confidentiality, principles that continue to be fundamental in healthcare today. So, you see, the Islamic Golden Age was a time of profound progress in medicine and healthcare. The work of scholars like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, the establishment of hospitals, pharmacies, and medical schools all played a part in shaping modern medicine. These advancements in healthcare continue to shape our medical practices today. The Islamic Golden Age wasn't all about science and medicine. It was also a time of blossoming arts and philosophy. Our journey into the flourishing arts and philosophy of the Islamic Golden Age begins with two pivotal figures, Al-Farabi and Ibn Rushd. Al-Farabi, often referred to as the second master after Aristotle, had a profound influence on philosophy and political thought. His vision of the ideal city, where citizens live in harmony under the guidance of a philosopher king, is a testament to his deep understanding of human nature and societal structures. Ibn Rushd, known in the West as Averroes, is another intellectual giant of this era. His extensive commentaries on Aristotle's works not only bridged the gap between Greek philosophy and Islamic thought, but also laid the groundwork for the European Renaissance. But philosophy was not the only field that flourished. The Islamic Golden Age was a time when the world witnessed the creation of stunning architecture, intricate calligraphy, and profound literature. The grandeur of the great Mosque of Cordoba, the mesmerizing calligraphy on the pages of the Quran, and the captivating tales spun by Scheherazade in 1001 Nights are all enduring testaments to this period's artistic genius. Perhaps one of the most significant contributions of this era was the translation movement. Scholars in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad undertook the mammoth task of translating Greek philosophical texts into Arabic. This not only preserved these invaluable texts, but also made them accessible to a wider audience, sparking a surge of intellectual curiosity and innovation that would ripple through the centuries. This intellectual and creative efflorescence was not confined to the confines of the Islamic world. The ideas, art, and knowledge generated during this period traveled across continents, influencing thinkers and artists far and wide. So while the Islamic Golden Age is often celebrated for its advancements in science and medicine, let's not forget the profound impact it had on arts and philosophy. The echoes of this vibrant era continue to resonate in our modern world, reminding us of a time when knowledge was revered, creativity was cherished, and the pursuit of understanding was a noble endeavor. This period's intellectual and creative contributions continue to inspire thinkers and artists to this day. The Islamic Golden Age may have ended centuries ago, but its impact is still felt today. For over 300 years, from the 8th to the 13th centuries, this period of remarkable intellectual and cultural growth laid the groundwork for many fields of study and practice we know today. Let's take a moment to revisit the key points we've discussed. In science, the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age made groundbreaking advancements. Their contributions to astronomy, mathematics, and physics have been instrumental, shaping the way we understand the universe today. Algebra, a term derived from the Arabic al-jabr, was developed during this era, and it's hard to imagine a world without it in our modern society. Medicine and healthcare also saw significant progress during this time. Muslim physicians, such as Ibn Sina, penned comprehensive medical encyclopedias that served as references for centuries. The concept of quarantine, now a common practice in public health, was first implemented during this period. In arts and philosophy, the Islamic Golden Age was a time of profound creativity and critical thinking. Muslim philosophers like Al-Farabi and Ibn Rushd developed theories and ideas that significantly influenced Western philosophy. The beauty of Islamic art and architecture, with its intricate geometric designs and calligraphy, continues to captivate us today. These innovations were not isolated incidents, but rather a testament to the flourishing intellectual culture of the Islamic Golden Age. This was a time when knowledge was highly valued, and scholars from different fields collaborated and learned from each other. It was an era of openness and curiosity, where learning was not confined to a single discipline, but spanned across various fields. As we stand on the shoulders of these intellectual giants, we continue to benefit from their wisdom and ingenuity. The Islamic Golden Age truly was a period that shaped the world. Its legacy is a testament to the power of knowledge, curiosity, and collaboration. It is a legacy that continues to inspire us, reminding us of the potential we have when we value knowledge, wisdom, and the pursuit of understanding.